Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave, and this is my daily ruling. Today's question comes to us straight out of the Judge Vault, and it's a very important interaction to know if you play this card in your deck. Amy attacks Nick with 2 grizzly bears. Nick is at 12 life, and he blocks one of the grizzly bears with Death Shadow, and he lets the other one through. What happens? Okay, so the first important thing that we need to know for this question is that all of the combat damage gets dealt at exactly the same time, as part of the same game event. This is true because none of the creatures involved have first strike or double strike. If any of them did, those creatures would have a special combat damage step where they would get to deal their combat damage first. However, all the other fundamentals regarding this question are going to be exactly the same. So, if you take that detail into account, you should be able to figure out exactly what will happen if any of the creatures involved do have one of those abilities. Okay, so what's this damage event going to look like? Well, for the case originally presented, we're going to see one grizzly bear is dealing 2 damage to Nick, another grizzly bear is dealing 2 damage to Death Shadow, and Death Shadow dealing 1 damage back to that grizzly bears. This is where the second piece of information that we're going to need for this question is going to come up. Continuous effects, like the one that affects Death Shadow's power and toughness, apply, well, continuously. That means that when the game is checking to see how state-based actions are going to be performed, it's going to consider that the Death Shadow has 3 toughness. The preceding life loss that Nick suffered during the damage that we just had is going to mean that the Death Shadow is looking at his new life total at the time when the state-based actions are going to be performed. That means that this Death Shadow will live, because it has 2 damage on it and 3 toughness, which is not lethal damage. In the same way, the grizzly bears only took 1 damage, so it also does not have lethal damage on it. It doesn't matter that the Death Shadow now has 3 power, the game only considers what its power was at the time when the combat damage was dealt. It doesn't retroactively go back and add 2 more damage on there just because the Death Shadow has a greater power now. At the time when combat damage was actually getting dealt, the Death Shadow only had 1 power, so that's how much combat damage it would have dealt. And so we're left with the kind of confusing interaction where all 3 of the creatures are going to survive this combat phase. I see a lot of people get really surprised by this, and it makes a lot of sense for me that that would be the case. After all, it's not generally going to happen that a creature's power or toughness is going to change mid-combat like this. However, with the fundamentals that you learned here today, now you have all the tools you need in order to answer this and similar sorts of questions if they ever come up in a game that you're a part of. And that's all I have for you today. How did you do? Join me again tomorrow for another daily ruling, but until then, I hope you have a great day.